welcome to another episode. So in this episode, continuing on the theme that I started with my Alpha 7 video a few months ago. And the theme is going to be the cameras of Jacques Bolsey. So if you're not familiar with who Jacques Bolsey is, I would encourage you to watch my Alpha 7 video. I'm not going to recover the same information I covered in the Alpha 7 video about Jacques Bolsey, so I would encourage you to watch that video. He is a very fascinating person. Now, as I mentioned in that video, after Jacques Bolsey came to the United States, he started his own company here called the Bolsey Camera Company, or Bolsey, you'll hear it pronounced. I'm pretty sure it's Bolsey, just based on how his family pronounces their last name. But I'm not entirely sure how the camera was pronounced when it was new back in the 1950s. So if you happen to be watching this video and were around back then, leave a comment below to describe how you pronounce the camera. Now, I know for sure it is not pronounced Bosley. You'll hear some people call it a Bosley, but if you look at the spelling of the camera, it is clearly Bolsey or Bolsey. So the camera I'm going to talk about today is the Bolsey Model C. This was the most advanced camera that the Bolsey company produced, and it's also a very interesting camera. So I'll take it out of its case, and you can see what makes it unique stands out right away. It is actually a twin lens reflex camera, so you can see the two lenses, and the reflex system is up here. But it also includes a rangefinder. So similar to the Alpha 7, this is such a unique arrangement to have both a twin lens reflex in this case and also a rangefinder focusing system. Now this camera actually belongs to my sister. She has kindly loaned this to me for the production of this video. I also have a Model B of my own, which I will feature in a future video, but I wanted to talk about this Model C because it does have such unique characteristics. Now, compared to the Alpha cameras that were produced by Bolsey in Switzerland, the cameras that he produced here in the US are marketed much more for mass market use, and the quality of the camera certainly reflects that. It's not a poor quality camera, but it definitely is of a lower quality standard than the Alpha cameras. So for instance, most of the camera is pressed metal. It does have a die cast, but relatively inexpensive body. The feature list is somewhat limited. The shutter is limited to just a few speeds. So he was clearly producing this camera much more for the average household to purchase, as opposed to the Alpha cameras, which were pretty exclusive even back then. If you're thinking about purchasing a Model C of your own, there are a couple of quirks to be aware of. One is the camera is equipped with a double exposure prevention system. That system requires that there's film in the camera in order for the shutter to be cocked. So if you find one of these cameras in a thrift store and you try to trigger the shutter, it may appear that the shutter is not working, but you just be aware that it does require film in the camera for the shutter cocking mechanism to work properly. Other than that, it's a fairly compact camera and easy to carry around. The camera is pretty basic. It just has a few shutter speeds, as I mentioned. It doesn't really have a lot of other features. If you want to use flash with this camera, you do have to use the Bolsey dedicated flash because the flash socket is located here on the back, and it requires the Bolsey flash unit to affix to the camera. But all that being said, it is an interesting camera, and thank you to my sister for loaning this to me, and we'll take it out shooting now.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this camera and my experience using it. Now, I do need to caveat this with 3 important caveats. I did make a couple of mistakes, one being this is the very first roll of film I ever passed through this camera, so I was definitely learning how the camera works and learning some of its quirks. Secondly, the roll of film that I used was very expired. It expired 20 years ago, so there was quite a bit of color shift, as you can see from the photos that I presented. And lastly, I hadn't noticed at first, but after a while I realized that the focus for the reflex system was pretty far out of adjustment. So the focus for the rangefinder system turned out to be fairly accurate, but the focus on the reflex system was not very good. One of the problems that I experienced related to not having any experience using this camera was that I was struggling a little bit with the double exposure prevention device, which consists of a little sprung pin that keeps the shutter actuation lever from being moved. So when you're taking a picture, as you move the shutter release down, the first thing that happens is that pin pops out, and it's a very audible and tactile click when that happens, similar to triggering a shutter. And then you have to continue moving the shutter lever, and then the shutter trips, which sounds almost exactly the same. So if you haven't used the camera much and you're not used to this, the natural inclination is to feel like that first click is the shutter tripping, but in actuality that's just the double exposure prevention device releasing. So then what happens is you tend to move, and you can see in several of my photos that I had quite a bit of motion blur, and I suspect it was that I was not used to that kind of double click associated with the shutter of this camera. So that's it for this video. I know it's been a while since my last video, so I appreciate you coming back and visiting this one. I do have several other videos lined up, and I hope to get those out shortly, so hopefully it won't be as long before I publish my next one. Thanks again, and I will see you in the next video.